In this video, we will see how to say this kind of sentences. Tú estudias en el Cervantes, ¿verdad? Now, the thing is that most of the times, English grammar is much easier than a Spanish one. But in this case, while in Spanish we always say verdad, it doesn't matter the verb tense we are using. In English, it is not the case. So this question tag, this way to say verdad in English, depends on the verb tense I'm using here. Now, I will give you some examples. That is your mother, isn't she? Esa es tu madre, ¿verdad? That is not your mother. Esa no es tu madre, ¿verdad? Is she? Now, as you can see, what we're going to do here in the question tag, we're going to do the opposite that we're doing here. So if we got a positive thing, the question tag is going to be negative. And if it is negative here, it is going to be positive. You passed your exam, didn't you? Tú aprobaste el examen, ¿verdad? Now, as you can see, if we are using the past simple, the question tag is going to be in the past simple too. You didn't pass your exam. No aprobaste el examen. Did you? ¿Verdad? And as before, if we have a positive here then you have a negative there. And the other way around here. What about if we say something in the future? So it works exactly the same. Jack will go, won't he? Jack va a ir, ¿verdad? So, will, won't, will. Okay, so in the next slide, I will show you how to do question tags depending on different verb tenses. So talking about the present of the verb to be, this is how we're going to do it. Now, you have to look for the first word that is the verb here. I mean, where can I find the verb? Here it is, that is, okay? And now, what I'm going to do is to write exactly the same word, but in the negative, to make the question tag. So in this case, it is exactly the same. This is the first word. The verb, I'm talking about the verb, okay? So if it is a negative form, I have to write here the positive one. What about the present simple? Now, she lives in Madrid, doesn't she? Ella vive en Madrid, ¿verdad? Okay, so what is the first word, the first verb we can find here? Lives. Right. How do I say the negative form of the verb live? I don't live, she doesn't live. Yeah, you got it. Okay, so this is the way I say no, the negative, okay? And in this case, it is exactly the same. What is the first word that is in the verb? Doesn't live. So, doesn't, does. Let's see the present continuous, which, by the way, it is exactly the same as the verb to be. She's living in Madrid, isn't she? Ella está viviendo en Madrid, ¿verdad? So this is the first word we find as a verb, and we have to write it down in a negative form. Past simple. She lived in Madrid, didn't she? Ella vivía en Madrid, ¿verdad? So if we have here the verb, now I have to make the negative form of it. Okay, how do I say no in the past? Now using didn't. So she didn't live in Madrid. Ella no vivía en Madrid, ¿verdad? So if we have the first word here, which is didn't, I have to say that in the positive way. Past continuous. So what is the first word that is in the verb was? Okay, Peter was living in Madrid, wasn't he? Pedro estaba viviendo en Madrid, ¿verdad? So, instead of writing was, I have to say the negative form of it. And here, the other way around. Now, Peter wasn't living in Madrid. Was he? Talking about the present perfect, it is always the same. So what is the first word I find? So it is has. So hasn't. So Peter has lived in Madrid, hasn't he? Pedro ha vivido en Madrid, ¿verdad? And Peter hasn't lived in Madrid. Okay, the other way around. Talking about modals, I'm just going to give you 2 examples, okay? You can do it. Venga, que tú puedes hacerlo, ¿verdad? So, this is the first word I find inside the verb, and this is the negative form of it. And what about, for example, couldn't? Okay, you couldn't do it. No lo pudiste hacer, ¿verdad? Couldn't, and I have to write exactly the same thing, but in the positive way. Past perfect simple, she had lived in Madrid, hadn't she? Ella había vivido en Madrid, ¿verdad? So this is the first word I find in the verb, and I have to write down the negative form of it. And here, it is the opposite thing, okay? So she hadn't lived in Madrid, had she? Talking about special question tags, we have the imperative. Stop laughing, will you? This is so easy, okay? Because it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. We will always say exactly the same thing. Stop laughing, will you? ¿Te callas? Deja de reírte, ¿vale? Okay, don't forget to text me. No olvides mandarme un WhatsApp, ¿vale? Okay. And for suggestions, we just say something like, let's go to the cinema, shall we? And we always say the same, shall we? So we will practice question tags with these exercises. So number 1, Kate won't be late, will she? Now in this case, in this example, here's the first word that is in the verb, and I have to write the same thing, but in the positive. You are tired. This is the word that is inside the verb, and I have to write it down here the opposite way. I mean, you are, aren't. And then the subject. Alright, so let's go. You travel a lot. Trouble. So how do you say that word, that verb in the negative way? Don't trouble. Okay, so don't. And now the subject. You travel a lot, don't you? You weren't listening. Tú no estabas escuchando, ¿verdad? No estabas escuchando. So what is the first word that is a verb? Weren't. So I have to write here exactly the same thing, but in the positive way. And then the subject. Sarah doesn't know un. Okay? Doesn't know. So I have to write this word here, but in the positive way. So does. And now the subject. She. Jack is on holiday. So if this is the verb here, I have to write it down in a negative way form here. Isn't he? Kate has been to China before. Kate has been to China before. So if I have has here, I have to write this first word, but in the negative way. Hasn't she? You can speak German. Can, so I write here exactly the same thing, but in the negative way. Form. Can't you? They won't mind if I take a picture, a photo. So this is the first word that I find, and I have to write it down the other way around. Instead of negative form, I have to write the positive. So will they? So this is a special one. There are a lot of people here, So this is the first word, that is a verb, and I have to write it down in a negative way, form, and now I have to say there. Let's go out tonight. Well, shall we? This isn't interesting. So we have isn't and I have to write is. And just because it is a thing, I have to say it. Is it? I'm too impatient. Okay, in this case, when we're talking about ourselves, we always say, am I? Okay? You wouldn't tell anyone. This is the first word I find. So, would you? Anne has lived here a long time. So this is the first word of the verb, and instead of has, I have to say hasn't she. I shouldn't have lost my temper. No debí haber perdido los nervios. So instead of shouldn't, I have to say should I. He had never met her before. Okay, had. So instead of had, hadn't he. And the last one, don't drop that vase. Talking about imperative, we always say, will you?